Hi there for Tech Republic. I'm Karen Roby. This is Jack Wallen. Today we are talking about web browsers. And Jack, this article has gotten a lot of traction, and I think a lot of people have strong feelings, when it comes to their browser, right? And I like that you put this out there. You've picked one, you're going with it across your platforms. Tell us which one and why.
This one's tough.
I
It
know,
really is.
I know.
Because like you said, it's not just about everybody having their favorite browser. This, even as far back as I can remember, and I hate to use this word, but this is a war.
Mm-hmm.
The old browser wars. They've been around forever and they just haven't gone away.
Right.
And I mean, people are so fanatic about their browsers, like soccer level fanatic.
Right.
So I know when I go into writing something like this, that I'm going to make friends and I'm going to make enemies.
Yep.
And more than likely, I'm going to make more enemies than I'm going to make friends.
Right.
And so here's the thing. I believe that I have tried every browser out there.
I believe that. Yep.
And I have tried some browsers that were worth about 2 seconds of my time. And I have tried browsers that have become my default for weeks or months, years even. And I came to this conclusion because I need a browser to work efficiently, to work well, and to do the things that I need it to do. I don't need a browser that everybody says is the best one. I don't need a browser that a company is going to try to force down my throat. And this all started when I was fairly certain that I found the browser for me, and that browser was Opera. And there was one feature that Opera had that redefined how I worked. And that feature is Workspaces. And with Workspaces, you could define these different workspaces, and then you could assign tabs to those workspaces. You could even assign pinned tabs to those workspaces. And you could add as many tabs as you want to that workspace and then switch back and forth between those workspaces. So when you're someone like me who has numerous tabs open at all times, it makes it easier to organize your productivity. And I fell in love with that feature. But then I had some problems. I would be working, now I am a Google Docs power user. I use Google Docs I'm in Google Docs about 7 to 9 hours a day. And part of it is writing my technical content, part of it is writing my fiction, my books. So I will have anything open that's between a 500-word article or a 70,000 word article. And it didn't matter how long of a document I had open in Opera. At some point, I knew that Google Docs was going to, that tab that Google Docs was in was going to consume every bit of my system memory, and the computer was going to lock up. And there was nothing I could do but either go do something else and wait till it crashes, wait till the tab crashes, or do a hard restart of my machine. So I said, I can't deal with this anymore, because my day has become so busy that I can't wait around for a tab to crash. On top of which, any writer will know this, when you're in the flow of something and you have to stop for something like that, it's time to pull your hair out.
Right.
Because it's not just a matter of a 10-minute interruption because of a tab crashing. It's a matter of a 10-minute interruption followed by another 2 or 3 minutes just to get back up to speed to where you were. So all of a sudden, my day was getting longer and longer and longer. So I said, there's got to be something else I could use. Well, I had been writing about Firefox. Yeah, I gave it away. Been writing about, well, I've been writing about Firefox for decades.
Right.
And I knew that they were rebooting the browser. I had given up on Firefox a long time ago because it had become nothing but bloatware, and it was unreliable, and the interface was clunky. So when they announced that they were completely revamping the interface, and they were getting rid of some of the bloat, I had to try. I knew that I was going to have to cover it for various and sundry publications. So I installed I installed the nightly version because I wanted to get a glimpse of it first before it was actually released. And as soon as I did, I was like, okay, that's nice. They cleaned up the interface. I mean, it's absolutely stunning what they did with the interface. And then I realized this thing is performing really well. It's outperforming Chrome. It's certainly outperforming Opera. Granted, it doesn't have workspaces, but I can deal with that as long as I get the performance and a clean interface. But initially I thought, well, I'll be using Firefox for a while so I can write about it, and I'll go back and find whatever browser it is I'm going to try next and to make as my default. But day after day, I kept returning back to Firefox. So I would write something about Firefox, or I would start Firefox and I would test some features, and I would go back to Opera and I would start writing about Firefox, and Opera would crash, and I'd be like, this is horrible. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to write this on Firefox. So I start writing it on Firefox, and then all of a sudden the next day I'm like, well, I'll just write my next article in Firefox. I wrote my next article in Firefox, and day 3 comes by, Firefox, day 4, Firefox, day 5, Firefox. And it just kept going on and on and on. And I realized that I'm not using Opera anymore. And then all of a sudden I'm setting off Firefox as my default browser on Linux. And then I use a MacBook Pro for video editing and also for editing my fiction, because my editor she uses a Mac. So and the problem with LibreOffice on any platform, when you get to a 300 or 400 page document, LibreOffice kind of tanks on you and it becomes useless. So I had to use Apple Pages for that, but I was using Safari because when I had my 2016 MacBook Pro, Safari worked just fine, but if I would load Chrome or Firefox, I would start it up and then I could just look up there at the battery percentage. I could watch it go down. I'm like, why am I watching my battery percentage go down in real time just because I'm using Firefox? Right. It doesn't make any sense. So on my Mac, I had to use Safari. Well, I got the Mac M1, and the new release of Firefox, they finally got it to work on the M1 hardware. So I was like, well, I'll install and see how it works. So I install Firefox and I look at the battery indicator and it's not budging. And it still doesn't budge, and it doesn't budge. And I start thinking, well, now I don't have to use Safari anymore Okay. So Firefox became my default on MacBook Pro. And I realized that my productivity wasn't being halted anymore, that everything just worked. And so it was a combination of the new interface, the increased productivity, this and the fact that, okay, when I review browsers, I usually approach things differently than other reviewers, because I don't think the average user really gives 2 pennies about benchmarks. They just don't. They don't care how many milliseconds difference between page loads. They don't care. They want it to work. They want it to be easy. That's what the average user wants. And given that the difference between page load times between, say, Firefox and Chrome is so negligible, and they both render things the same, there was no reason for me to use any other browser. Now, of course, in the name of transparency, there are websites that I have to use, say, Chrome with. Now, that's not on the browser. That's on the developers. And that's a problem because we still have, it is 2021 and we still have developers that are developing for one browser. Why? Why? That makes no sense because we have people using Android. We have people using, 50% of internet traffic is from a mobile device.
Right.
And that's either Android or iOS. So they're either using Chrome. Well, they don't have to because I use Firefox as my default Android browser now, or they're using Safari on iOS. So if you're only developing for Chrome, you're leaving out the Apple users.
Right, right.
Unless they're installing Chrome on their iPhone, and they're not. Because most people, like I said in another interview, most people buy their devices and use what's on it.
Absolutely, they do.
So now that's the average user. There are more technically inclined users who will get an Android phone. They'll go, I'm not using Chrome, I'm using Firefox or whatever. Same thing with iOS. But the truth of the matter is benchmarks really only matter to, and I say this, I use this term lovingly, to geeks and nerds.
Sure.
And that's great. There are times when I want to check out a benchmark.
Yeah.
I want to know. But I also know at the same time, as someone who has been writing for these audiences for a very long time, that for the most part, readers don't care about benchmarks.
No.
Most of the time, they'll scroll right past those benchmarks. They just want to know what the features are, if it's stable, if someone recommends it, and where to get it.
Right.
And why they should use it over another browser. And the truth of the matter is that every browser at some point in their existence is filled with bloatware. Now, fortunately, the developers of Firefox realized that and removed a lot of the bloatware. Now, that's not to say that the Mozilla Foundation doesn't have its problems. It does. It's an organization that is rife with problems. But they create a good browser, and they also create a really good email client. And I know that there are people out there that when they read that article, they said, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about." Well, I kind of do. And the other thing is that the amount of time I spend in a browser, if you do something 10,000 times, you're kind of an expert on something.
Yep.
And I would say that I have way past 10,000 hours in a browser.
Way past.
So, for anybody out there watching, if you want to experience what a clean, reliable browser is, download and install Firefox. That doesn't mean you have to make it the default. That doesn't mean you're going to be stuck with it. You can install it next to Chrome, next to Safari, next to Brave or Opera or any of the other browsers, and try them out. And eventually you're going to realize that one of them suits you better than the other. And ultimately, that is what is most important for users, is that they actually take the time to find out what's best for them. Don't use what's best for me, because the way I use a browser is probably different than the way you use a browser. So if you're at all interested, just install Firefox and use it. Try it out and see if you like it. If you don't like it, go back to Chrome. No harm, no foul. You could even uninstall it. There's nothing, no sign of it ever being there.
Right.
You've wasted a little bit of your time. No big deal. Or you might find a browser that you like even better. And that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, what works for you, right? And your suggestion obviously is Firefox, so it doesn't hurt for people to try.
Right.
See if it's a good fit. Well, the browser wars, as we've talked about before, Jack, something certainly that has gone on, continues, and people again get personal about it and what fits them. But I like that you are an expert on this, and you've put in the hours, and this is what fits you. sharing
Yeah.
that information for everybody. So, we appreciate all of you guys, of course, watching and hearing what Jack's thoughts are on this. And as I mentioned, lots of articles there that we've got on TechRepublic about this very subject. So we hope you all will check them out. Jack, thanks for being with me today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, everybody, make sure you check this out and much more on TechRepublic.